A swift episode of battle in the Pacific. Japanese planes fought off by American guns.
World War II veterans laid a wreath at the World War II Memorial this morning to mark the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Midway. It was the Allies' first major naval victory against the Japanese and dubbed a turning point in the Pacific theater. You see Bob Dole there. More than 300 Americans and more than 3,000 Japanese were killed in that battle. And you see those veterans there. Every year there is less and less World War II veterans to memorialize things like this.
The greatest generation.
For many, many reasons. We'll see you tomorrow.
Fired FBI Director James Comey in the spotlight, preparing to testify next week before the Senate Intelligence Committee. But could the president invoke executive privilege and slam the door shut on his testimony about his conversations with the president? Hello and welcome to a brand new hour inside America's news headquarters. I'm Kelly Wright.
And I'm Julie Banderas. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer is not ruling out the use of executive privilege, but at least one report says it's not a likely move.
Kristen Fisher is live at the White House with more. Kristen?
Hey, Kelly, well, the question for President Trump is what will be more damaging? What Comey will say in public for all the world to see, or what it will look like if President Trump tries to muzzle him? Well, yesterday, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer was non-committal when asked if executive privilege would be invoked.
That committee hearing was just noticed, and I think obviously it's got to be reviewed.
And so that is not a no?
No, I was just saying literally, my understanding is the date for that hearing was just set. I have not spoken to counsel yet. I don't know how they're going to respond.
Now, the New York Times is reporting that two senior administration officials are saying that President Trump will not invoke executive privilege. But as we have learned time and time again, nothing is final with this White House until it actually happens. So with that caveat, I want to take a look at another huge hearing taking place on Capitol Hill next week. And this one involves the intelligence chief, the NSA director, the acting FBI director, and the deputy attorney general who signed off on this special counsel that's taking place the day before Comey's appearance. And we've also learned that special counsel, which is investigating possible ties between the Trump campaign and Russia, that special counsel is expanding to take over a separate criminal probe involving former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort. So with all of these stories, all of these leaks, all of these potentially damaging testimony that's going to be taking place next week on Capitol Hill, you can see why this White House has been scrambling behind the scenes to set up a communications war room. Now, we've been hearing two names talked about for quite some time to reportedly head up this operation, and the names we're hearing over and over are two former campaign operatives, Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie. What's different now, though, is that Fox has learned that this war room will now be run outside of the White House, likely as a nonprofit. So the idea, let this outside entity handle everything to do with the Russia investigation so that the White House can get down to the business of actually governing. Kelly.
It's going to be a very busy week next week. Thank you so much, Kristen, reporting live from the White House today.
So for more, let's bring in Charlie Hurt, Washington Times opinion editor and Fox News contributor. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, Julie.
First of all, Trump insiders are saying that President Trump doesn't want to block Comey's testimony, and why would he if he has nothing to hide? There's been no evidence of collusion between Russia and the campaign, and so why not get the truth out there? Do you believe that anybody from the Trump administration will want to block Comey's testimony?
Well, on the legal point about whether the president has the authority to invoke executive privilege, I think that the people that are suggesting that somehow his right to invoke that right now is somehow in question, they don't know what they're talking about. He has absolute right to invoke that privilege in this case. But I don't think he will, and I don't think that, and I think he's smart not to. And the reason for that, Julie, is because we largely know what the answer to all the questions the Democrats are asking right now about this. Did Donald Trump do anything to impede the investigation, to obstruct justice. And, FBI Director Comey has testified on at least 2 occasions very clearly, and also behind closed doors in conversations with both Democrats and Republicans, that in no way does he think that the president has done anything to obstruct that. And so I think that testimony, whatever the testimony he gives, as long as it's along those lines, it's only going to help the president. And if he veers from that, I think he'll get grilled pretty good.
Okay, so Comey's testimony is expected to focus on these private meetings with the former FBI director and the internal memos specifically. And those memos are the ones that Comey had said that he might release, and that he had taken notes on their conversations, which he says President Trump had at one point asked him to go ahead and drop the investigation on Michael Flynn. President Trump says that conversation never took place. So what about those internal memos do you believe could potentially be harmful if he were to testify?
Well, I think that the reason I think that that his testimony will ultimately be helpful is because all we have heard from those memos are cherry-picked lines out of context that were read to certain reporters who obviously had, they were writing stories that were very damning about Donald Trump. And so I think that once you get those lines put into context, that can only help Donald Trump. I don't think anybody was leaking those excerpts from those letters in order to help Donald Trump or anything. They were obviously looking to find the most damning thing that they could find. And so I think that will be helpful. I don't know, though, and the most important thing here about those conversations is that clearly Comey did not feel like there was an effort to obstruct justice. Because if he did feel like there was an effort to obstruct justice by the president, he would have been obligated at that time to immediately report it and open an investigation into that specific charge. And the fact that he didn't, I think, if he does try to build a case now,
right,
based on what we know so far, it's going to be a radical departure from what we know or what he has said or what he has testified to.
Legal experts,
it'll lead to real problems.
Here's what legal experts say. They believe that President Trump does not have a strong case to invoke the privilege due to his public acknowledgement of the conversations he had with Comey. The question and the concern from an outsider is, what was the intent? What was the motive for Comey at the time to jot these notes down? And what was the temperature in those conversations? Was it a joke? I mean, was it like, oh, come on, just back off, you know what I mean? Or was it a legitimate,
I think
I would like
exactly
you to stop and seize your investigation? Right. I don't know if it was the latter.
Right. Well, 2 things. One is the fact that Comey wrote these things down. That is not only is that not unusual, that is by law what all federal
FBI
officials, or anybody else in the federal government is supposed to do after a private meeting with another federal official. It's called, it's all part of the Open Meetings Act. They're supposed to do that. Obviously, Comey, to his credit, was somebody who always did that, or at least routinely did that, and he should be saluted for that, because that's a very good thing for those of us who want the inner workings of the federal government to be made public.
Right.
But so people trying to make that into something sinister has always sort of puzzled me. I don't know what that's all about. But I have to say, Julie, I think my impression is that very much what you just said. Maybe not joking around, but perhaps palling around a little bit.
That's kind of how Donald Trump is. You know what I mean? Like, he's not always formal, and I could totally see him saying, "Oh God, can you just give it a rest?" You know what I mean?
And by Comey's own testimony, he was, what Trump was saying is, look, he's a good guy, lay off of him. There's nothing here. And I can very much see that. And what's important, again, going back to this, the thing about intent, clearly Jim Comey didn't think the intent was to somehow subvert this investigation, because if he did think that, if he really thought it was a serious effort to somehow thwart a real investigation, then he would have been obligated to report it and begin an investigation into that.
Oh, yeah, very good point. I mean, if there was red flags, he would have right away. He had to speak up, or he would have spoken up, or he should have, but he didn't until after he was fired, and that's a very good point to make.
And we know Jim Comey is not afraid to speak up when he needs to.
No, he's not. That's a great point. I'm glad we got that out, too. Charlie Hurt, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie.
Defense Secretary Jim Mattis turning up the heat on North Korea, calling the rogue regime a, quote, clear and present danger. The Pentagon chief speaking at a security conference in Singapore where he tried to reassure U.S. allies about America's commitment in the Asia-Pacific region. Ellison Barber is tracking this story. She joins us now from Washington with more details. Ellison.
When it comes to China, there are potential highs and lows in General Mattis's eyes. The Secretary of Defense says the U.S. is encouraged by some of China's actions in regards to North Korea, but they are not pleased when it comes to their actions in the South China Sea. At that annual security conference in Singapore, Mattis told representatives from dozens of countries the U.S. is not going to overlook China's construction and militarization of 7 artificial islands in the South China Sea, an area that's at the center of a prolonged territorial dispute, primarily between 6 countries. Mattis criticized China for showing, quote, disregard for international law. But the U.S. is hopeful when it comes to China and North Korea.
The Trump administration is encouraged by China's renewed commitment to work with the international community toward denuclearization. Ultimately, we believe China will come to recognize North Korea as a strategic liability, not an asset.
China is the reclusive regime's closest ally. On Friday, the UN Security Council voted to expand targeted sanctions against North Korea. It took weeks to negotiate, but what they passed is noteworthy because it's the first time since Trump took office that China and the U.S. agreed to pass this sort of resolution at all. The secretary also fielded a question about global order at the end of this conference and the U.S.'s decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. Mattis promised the group the U.S. is committed to its allies. At one point, he made reference to a quote that's often attributed to Winston Churchill, saying, "Bear with us. Once we have exhausted all possible alternatives, the Americans will do the right thing." Kelly?
Ellison Barber from Washington. Thank you, Ellison.
You bet.
A series of explosions rocking a cemetery in the Afghan capital, killing at least 6 people who were attending a funeral. This comes just days after a massive truck bomb killed 90 people and wounded nearly 500 more in Kabul. Meanwhile, violent protests are entering their second day, with demonstrators calling for more security in the capital city. John Huddy is live in our Middle East Bureau with the very latest. Hi, John.
Well, Julie, Kabul is on police lockdown tonight because of these protests, as you mentioned, yesterday and today, and because of this latest violence, the bombing at the funeral proving yet again that really no one and no place is safe in Afghanistan, in particular the country's capital, even, as I said, even a funeral. Now, Afghan officials say that the 3 blasts went off at the funeral for the son of Afghanistan's deputy speaker of the Senate. His son was one of 4 people killed during those violent protests yesterday in Kabul. Now, several high-ranking Afghan officials were also at the funeral today when the explosions erupted, carried out by 3 suicide bombers, according to security officials that were posing as mourners among the crowd of an estimated 1,000 people. Well, those officials, including the government's chief executive, were unharmed. But this latest attack is really another example and really shows the chaos and violence gripping Afghanistan after Wednesday's truck bombing in Kabul's diplomatic quarter, killing 90 people and wounding more than 450 others. Yesterday, as mentioned, more than 1,000 protesters hit the streets of Kabul, calling for the resignation of Afghan President Ashraf Ghani over what they say is the crumbling security situation, clashing with police who opened fire upon the crowds. And today, another protest was held also at the site of Wednesday's bombing. And Julie, while no group has claimed responsibility for these attacks, for these latest attacks, government officials say it was most likely the work of the Taliban, jeopardizing peace talks that were scheduled and that are scheduled to start Tuesday in Kabul, and creating a bloody start to the holy Muslim holy month of Ramadan that began last week. Julie.
All right, John Huddy. Thank you. Kelly.
Multiple officers shot while trying to arrest a dangerous suspect. Details are straight ahead on how this all played out.
Plus, new pushback against the sanctuary city law in Texas as the state faces legal challenges on two fronts. Can the law pass muster in court? A fair and balanced debate coming up next.
Welcome back. Time now for a quick check of the headlines. 3 police officers wounded in Laredo, Texas last night after a manhunt for a murder suspect ends in a shootout. The alleged shooter, 55-year-old Antonio Rodriguez, was suspected of killing his girlfriend earlier in the day. He was shot and killed by police. A naval flight officer sentenced to 6 years in prison after being convicted of espionage. Lieutenant Commander Edward Lynn pleaded guilty to deliberately disclosing classified information and failing to disclose foreign contacts, among other charges. And a former NSA official claims the NSA conducted blanket surveillance of the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. He says the agency collected all digital communications in and out of Salt Lake City, including email and text messages. The current head of NSA operations says the surveillance was limited to only international communications with potential links to terrorism.
The House Intelligence Committee ramping up its investigation into Russia's election meddling and now issuing 7 new subpoenas, including 3 that could shed some new light on allegations top Obama-era officials improperly sought to unmask Trump campaign members swept up in the probe. Republican Congressman Scott Taylor joins me now, a member of the House Appropriations Committee, subcommittee member on Homeland Security, and a former Navy SEAL. Congressman, thank you. This is pretty disturbing.
Good afternoon.
Just give me your interpretation when you hear about these 7 subpoenas. What does that make you think?
Well, you know, I think that the word that you use is very applicable here, and that's concerning. This isn't a partisan issue. This is an American issue, and Americans should be very concerned. Now, this program, of course, that's gaining intelligence is something that has been successful to deter or to figure out, stop attacks, if you will. But at the same time, there are very strict procedures put in place so that there's a strict firewall between partisan politics and national security. And obviously what we're seeing, we saw that it was revealed that Susan Rice, her request for folks from the other party to unmask them was more so. There were more requests past the November election. The fact that Samantha Power is being subpoenaed, whether she was one who was asking for that or maybe she potentially had information of folks that were unmasked, is particularly concerning given the fact that she's a diplomat and not an intelligence officer, and clearly there would be some partisan politics at play here. So the American people have to be concerned about a firewall between partisan politics and national security, and it is right that the Congress execute their oversight over this for sure.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because partisan politics at play here, those words are serious. Those are criminal words. Because if there is proof that, in fact, this was politically motivated, that is illegal. It is legal for someone to unmask an individual for intelligence purposes, but to unmask them for political purposes is illegal. And they should be subpoenaed, and there should be investigation, and it should have happened a long time ago. 3 of the subpoenas were issued to the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA, seeking details related to the alleged unmasking, and those requests were made by the former National Security Advisor Susan Rice. Why is it then that this investigation somehow seems to have been covered up, and then now all of a sudden we're hearing about it?
Well, you have a different administration in there now, and look, there's some common sense at play here, right? Folks were unmasked, names were leaked. Some of those, the request for the unmasking had to be given or requested to the intelligence community, so they should be subpoenaed to figure out who requested it, where it went. So people, it was requested, they had the information was leaked. There are some big problems here. And again, the American people have to have confidence that there's a firewall between partisan politics and national security. And as you said, if in fact people were unmasking American citizens in a politically motivated way, you have a crime here. I'm not saying that you do. We don't have the facts yet. Just as though the other investigations are ongoing between Russia and everything, let the facts lie where they may. But it's important that we get to the bottom of this for the confidence of the American people.
Okay, so we talked about the 3 subpoenas. 4 others issued Wednesday focused on the former Trump campaign aide Michael Flynn. And that has obviously played into the former FBI director James Comey and whether he will testify. Let's talk about the subpoena of Michael Flynn. What do you think they'll find there?
You know, I'm not really sure. I know that there's a lot of political football going here, and what I will say, underlying in all this issue is the fact that the United States doesn't have a uniform policy for cyber. What's an act of war? What's an act of aggression? What happens if a country meddles in our election? There's no policy there. There needs to be a policy. That being said, you know, yes, Michael Flynn has been subpoenaed. Were there some wrongdoings there? Has been investigated for some months now by the FBI. And again, let the facts lie where they may. And if folks did something that was either criminal or was wrong, then they should be held to account. And that includes anyone in this country.
But here's what I don't understand, because it's not like Michael Flynn wasn't forthright with the administration. I mean, he went to the vice president and explained his history. Susan Rice apparently had gone to then campaign and candidate President Trump before he became elected and had explained that there was some reason why he might be able to be blackmailed by the Russians. So none of this was a surprise. But then when Vice President Mike Pence came out and said that he had no idea that he had any dealings, financial dealings, as we know, with other countries, apparently that was a surprise to the vice president. So there's some disconnect here. I guess we just need to get some help connecting the dots. Maybe you could do it.
I wish that I could connect those dots for you. I don't know all those things. I know. Listen, I want to say that Michael Flynn has served this country with honor for decades. So it's important to say that, and all these things that are happening, and you know, his name's been smashed around in the press in many different ways, and partisan politics have gotten in play. But let's not forget that this man served this country very honorably for a very long time. So whatever, if there's an issue here and there's something that he needs to be held accountable for, okay, that will happen. But at the same time, that should not negate his service to this country.
Absolutely,
so,
I agree.
Yeah, there is some disconnect there, and I don't know exactly what that is, and neither does anybody else, quite frankly, on the other side of the other political party that's out there constantly talking about it.
You know what else I also find to be a little unnerving is the fact that you've got the former Obama administration and officials like Susan Rice coming out saying that Michael Flynn's a bad guy. They've been keeping their eye on him. They didn't trust him, and they thought he was not going to be the right person for the job, but yet he had full security clearance under President Obama. He had full security clearance to go to Russia and to meet with officials there. They had no problem with him at that point. So then at what point did they change their mind about Michael Flynn? Because if they didn't like him, then he wouldn't have been doing all of that, and they wouldn't have given him the security clearance. There's a lot of politics in play, and we just need to know, what are the motives behind him.
It was revealed, and that's a good question. Listen, I don't think Susan Rice was good for the job that she was in. I don't agree with that whatsoever. I don't question her clearance. She was cleared. Okay, no problem. But, it has been revealed that she requested more unmasking and names and with a greater volume after the election.
I'm just saying you do not give security clearance to someone that you think that the Russians are going to use to blackmail the United States. I mean, what?
There's no question.
Yeah, no. All right. Anyway, Congressman, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
So fun. Kelly.
All right, meantime, anti-Trump protesters are rallying nationwide, holding what they've dubbed the March for Truth. Coming up, the answers they're seeking.
Stand up.
Pro and anti-Trump rallies going on across the country today. A rally taking place outside the White House to support pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and so-called March for Truth rallies calling for an independent commission to look into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Garrett Tenney is live from the National Mall covering it all for us, where one of those rallies, in fact, just wrapped up just moments ago. Hey, Garrett.
Hey, Julie, you know, these rallies are a very grassroots efforts by more than a dozen activist groups, and the goal of these rallies has really changed a bit. Since the appointment of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, organizers say they are now wanting to put the pressure on both Mueller and Congress to fully investigate any ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. And a lot of folks that were here today were very open about where they hope those investigations lead.
I want to see the investigation of Trump lead to impeachment. I'm pleased to see that Mueller's right on top of it and is proceeding quickly along with that half of the that part of the investigation to bring criminal charges against those around Trump and including Trump.
And organizers say there are more than 100 marches scheduled across the country today, and climate change was another issue a lot of folks came out for after the president's decision to leave the Paris climate deal. But at the White House, the president's supporters came out as well to say thank you for keeping that campaign promise.
It's the media that's making the division and the other leftist groups, but the reality is people do support what he's doing. And hopefully, as he moves along his agenda, people will see that he really has the best intentions.
And a lot of these activist groups, Julie, have said that today's March for Truth rallies are just the beginning of what they're calling a summer of demonstrations. Julie?
All right, thank you very much. Kelly.
Julie, thank you. The cities of San Antonio and Austin are suing the state of Texas in an effort to block the state's sanctuary city law. Republican Governor Greg Abbott signed the bill into law last month. The lawsuit argues the law is unconstitutional and more cities and counties may soon follow suit. So let's talk about this with immigration attorney Francisco Hernandez, who joins us now. Francisco, your impression of this law first to begin with.
Well, you know, quite frankly, it's a political phantom. It does nothing. It's a hollow law. It's really a fight between the lieutenant governor and the speaker of the House of Representatives. It doesn't do anything that police officers weren't already allowed to do, and it doesn't give them any direction or any obstruction or obligation. It is really a political game between politicians. It does nothing. There is no such thing as a sanctuary city. A city cannot oppose the federal government. ICE can come in and pick up anybody from any local jail anytime they want. And the problem is my side is taking the bait, hook, line, and sinker, and now we're jumping in. It isn't constitutional, by the way, just as we were 15 years ago with Arizona and rental restrictions. But bottom line, it's time for Congress to act.
Well, let me bring in what Governor Greg Abbott has said and how he defines this law. One, it would be a $25,000 per day fine on any sanctuary city, and also exposes any sheriff or official to jail time if they fail to cooperate with ICE or federal officials when they have a known illegal criminal in their custody who should be, according to them, deported.
But it has never happened. You understand that the information...
You say it's never happened, yet in other cities like San Francisco, there have been people who have been killed by illegal immigrants.
It's not true. It is not true.
What do you mean it's not true?
Now,
Kate Steinle?
Well, the problem is ICE didn't pick him up within the 48-hour that the immigration, the ICE hold provides. The person that had been transferred from L.A. to San Francisco on a minor violation. The ICE hold only means...
Wait a minute, hold the phone 1 second there. You're telling me then that that person who killed that young girl who was out with her father...
Yes.
It should have been allowed to go free? No one should have turned him in?
There was no legal hold once ICE failed to pick him up.
We can't go back and bring back that young lady.
You're right.
And that illegal immigrant should have never been on the streets to begin with when he was already known for committing crimes. So here Texas apparently is trying to stop this through a sanctuary movement. And it goes on to say, the governor telling Fox and Friends moments after, well, a day after he initiated this and signed this bill into law, which becomes effective, by the way, in September, he wanted to say it's quasi-insane that we have to pass a law to force law enforcement to comply with the law. Your response to that?
Exactly, because it was already the law. What's more than quasi-insane is actually insane that states keep trying to do this patchwork for this void that Congress has left. That guy should have been in federal prison for illegal reentry after deportation 5 times. Should have been in federal prison. We had 5 shots at it, and we let him go each time. But it wasn't because of a sanctuary city. It's simply because ICE didn't pick him up. Now, let me tell you, they do a very, very good job, but they're not asking for the city's assistance and cooperation. Have you noticed that? They don't need it, and they don't want it.
Why shouldn't there be some cooperation when you have a known criminal element that happens to be illegal, should have been deported, and has already committed previous crimes? I'm not understanding the common sense there.
Let me tell you something. When an undocumented person with criminal background or not goes into the jail, immigration sends an immigration hold. ICE sends an immigration hold. It says, if you're going to let him go for any reason, give us 48 working hours to come and pick him up. Fair enough? If those 48 hours pass up and ICE didn't come pick him up, there's no way to hold them because there's no other charges.
All right, so Francisco, you're going ahead with this to try to block the state from actually enacting this law, which, as I said earlier, becomes law effectively in September. Other city officials are less rebellious. There's San Antonio Mayor Ivy Taylor, who called the lawsuit premature, noting that San Antonio was the first city to join the litigation despite others being invited. You're jumping out in front. Do you think others will try to follow suit and stop the governor from pushing this law through? It's already the law of the land as of September.
It is already, well, it was already under the Constitution. We don't need this bill. It is a waste of time by both sides. It's political posturing to keep the issue going because Congress refuses to act.
The state attorney general there is opposing you or any other person trying to file litigation against them.
I think he's under indictment. I think he's under indictment for fraud,
really?
Isn't he?
You're going to go there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, he is under indictment.
All right, Francisco Hernandez, this is going to be a heated debate, obviously, as it's been in the Lone Star State, and a lot of people throughout the country are watching this. You're saying it doesn't have to be. Let's see what will happen in the court of law and see how you guys fare on that, as well as the state, which has to defend its actions as well.
I'm not filing a lawsuit. It's a waste of time.
All right, Francisco, thank you.
Well, veterans gathering in our nation's capital to commemorate one of the most pivotal battles of World War II and remember the service members who lost their lives. Plus, President Trump under fire for pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, but some think the criticism would come no matter what the president does.
If the president would have chosen not to pull out of the Paris Accords, which was the right thing to do, was to pull out, if he didn't, the mainstream media would have attacked him for flip-flopping and having, no compunction about not telling the truth on the campaign trail.
Against the Japanese fleet in the Pacific. The Battle of Midway took place 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and it was a decisive victory that put the U.S. Navy on the offensive in the Pacific theater. We thank our brave veterans for their service.
Well, the White House fending off a backlash from the mainstream media for its decision to pull out of the Paris climate deal. But will the pullout make that big of a difference? Or is it just a huge overreaction from the left? Joining us now to discuss all of this is Brad Blakeman, a former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush, and Adrienne Elrod, the former director of strategic communications for Hillary Clinton and a Democratic strategist. Thank you both for joining us.
Pleasure.
Adrienne, let's begin with you. What do you say about all of this the hoopla over the president making the decision to pull out of the Paris Accord?
Well, first of all, I don't necessarily think it's a lot of hoopla. This is a very serious issue. It's a gross abdication of U.S. responsibility and leadership to pull out of this agreement. But I will say that I think this plays right into Donald Trump's hands. I think he wanted the media to, in his view, overhype this issue and over-sensationalize it so that he could try to paint this as an elitist issue when climate change is the last thing from being any sort of elitist issue. It's something we should all be concerned about.
Brad, your thoughts?
Well, the clear and present danger to the world, and I wish the world could get together on issues like radical Islam, which is a direct threat to our country here and now, or the proliferation of nuclear weapons, than climate change. This was a sham agreement, and if President Obama thought it was so important, not only for our country, but for the world, he would have followed the procedure that is called for in the Constitution, have it ratified by the Senate. He didn't do that. And President Trump campaigned on repealing this terrible agreement for America that was inequitable, unfair, job killer. So it's no surprise that he did it. But of course, the media in America has become a globalist media. The New York Times should be called the Global Times. They don't have a national interest to our country. They've become citizens of the world. And Donald Trump promised and delivered something that is heretofore not seen by politicians. So thumbs up to Donald Trump for keeping his word and for getting America out of a terrible agreement.
Adrian, when I watch all of the people who are concerned about this, and many people are flummoxed by the president's decision, although some had anticipated that this would happen, that he would actually keep his campaign promise. The future, what does it hold for America in terms of its global view and its global position with the president making this decision?
Well, I mean, it's terrible for our future. I mean, the world looks to America for leadership on issues such as climate change.
But does it look to America in terms of financially helping solve all their problems, which was happening as a part of this deal, as I understand it? This was paying most of the bulk of what was needed for this.
Well, look, again, at the end of the day, the good news here is this was not a this is a non-binding agreement. There are mayors from across the country in the United States. There are companies that are coming together and making sure that we stick with the Paris Accords, all of the terms laid out in the agreement, so that we can maintain our responsibility to this agreement without actually being part of this agreement. So, I'm hoping that Donald Trump will actually say what he's saying he's going to do and try to renegotiate terms for the United States so that we can rejoin this agreement in the future. I think that's going to be very difficult to do because I think we've lost significant credibility on this issue from a global standpoint. But the good news is there are companies and there are local leaders across this country that are doing their job to make sure that we adhere to the accords that are laid out in this agreement.
Brad, to Adrian's point, there are many people in the United States, California, Pittsburgh, they're all basically stating that they will in somehow, some way keep in agreement with this Paris Accord on climate change. The president is saying that he wants to renegotiate it, but then you have the international backlash from Macron of France, as well as Angela Merkel of Germany, and other nations also stepping up to say, or actually denounce what the president's decision was. What does the president have to do to try to renegotiate this and bring people back to the table to get a deal that he believes would be fair and balanced for the United States?
A deal is only as good as it is for both parties. A deal is good when it's honored in enforcement and not in the breach. This deal was bad for America. Barack Obama knew that, and that's why he didn't go to the Senate. And if anything, when you talk about credibility, America's credibility is now enhanced because finally people can say when the president talks, he means what he says, and he's going to do what he says. Something that the pander, appeasement, and apology has been the last 8 years. As far as local officials, state and cities honoring this agreement, more power to them. If they think it's in the best interest of their constituents, then they should do it. That's what America is about, local rule, not coming from the federal government. If the states of California and others and cities want to honor this agreement, then they should.
Brad and Adrian, I wish we could get you for a final word, but we've got to go. I appreciate you, both of you, sharing your comments and your insights on this explosive issue that's going to likely continue for some time to come. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
The intense legal battle over President Trump's travel ban. Well, it's now reaching the nation's highest court. Up next, a live report on the latest in the showdown. The Justice Department this week asking the Supreme Court to revive President Trump's travel ban. Lower courts have so far ruled the administration cannot legally keep people from 6 Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S. So what gives? Will Carr, live at Los Angeles in the international airport there. Hey there, Will.
Hey there, Julian. After bouncing around in the lower courts, the controversial travel ban now winds up in front of the Supreme Court. Keep in mind, this is the second version of the ban. The Trump administration wants to halt travel for 90 days from 6 countries: Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Last month, the Fourth Circuit ruled that this version likely violates the Constitution, but the Supreme Court now has its newest justice on the bench, Judge Neil Gorsuch. That gives the court a conservative tilt, and Vice President Mike Pence feels confident the court will rule in favor of the ban.
President Donald Trump has no higher priority than the safety and security of the people of this country. He's taken bold and decisive action, asserting an executive order to pause immigration from countries that have been compromised by terrorism or don't have the systems in place that we can be confident that when people apply to come here, that they don't represent a threat.
You remember that the first version of the travel ban sparked protests at airports across the country, including here at LAX, where passengers today tell us that they have mixed feelings, some questioning why more countries with links to terror aren't on the list.
I'd like to see the court affirm the appellate conclusion, which is to, I think that it seems un-American and illegal to discriminate against peoples for their religion.
The administration is now asking for the ban to go into effect immediately, and there's no timetable on when the Supreme Court may make their decision. Julie.
Will Carr, thank you so much. Kelly.
Engineers unveiling the car of the future. Meet the SkyDrive, how it works and when it could be in a showroom near you.